You've heard a lot about electric vehicles. Here's a twist you probably didn't see coming. Georgia, right here in the South, is leading the country in EV manufacturing investment. From the factory floor to your driveway, we'll connect the dots between innovation, industry, and everyday life. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Battery Belt podcast presented by the Georgia Network for Electric Mobility, where we talk to the people shaping the Southeast's energy transition and mobility future. I'm your host, Gabby Pierre, and every episode we explore the innovations, industries, and ideas powering what we call the Battery Belt. That's the growing electric mobility and advanced automotive manufacturing corridor stretching across the southeastern US. Today's episode is all about the technology at the heart of that transformation, batteries. And they power everything from electric vehicles to smartphones and to energy storage systems and even data centers and AI. Our guest today is Jill Pestana, as I mentioned, founder and CEO of Pestana Solutions. She has more than 15 years of experience in the battery industry and over 14 patents in battery science. Brilliant at breaking down the nitty-gritty of how batteries actually work in a way that's accessible to everyone. I'm very excited to talk to Jill today because we originally met at a conference earlier this summer. It was an EV supplier conference forum situation in Chattanooga held by AIAG, where we were both speaking. And ever since, we've been collaborating. Most recently, on an article with Atlanta Business Chronicle last month called Decades in the Making about battery manufacturing and the challenges in the domestic reshoring of battery manufacturing in a lot of ways. So, Jill, to start us off, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody we bring on the pod, which is, in your own words, what is the battery belt and why should we care about it?
Yes, and you said it briefly before, that southeast region of the United States where we're seeing a lot of battery and electric vehicle industry popping up. And it's a really unique region, and Georgia is, of course, part of that. So to me, that's the battery belt.
And why do you think we should care about it? Or why do you care about it? That's also
Oh,
a part of it as well.
I mean, where do I start? I think it's an amazing opportunity for the US to build up a battery industry, to electrify and to provide diverse sources of energy for our population. It's such a critical area of development right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I consider it a very much a mission critical initiative. And my weird thing about the title Battery Belt is that it's kind of a name that was given to the Southeast and we've kind of just ran with it.
Yeah,
And I love that vibe about it. It's
it
very
has a ring.
entrepreneurial. It has a
It
ring.
has a ring.
Exactly. So we have questions that are kind of batched by topic. And the first topic that we're starting with is battery basics. So, at the most basic level, because there's a lot of confusion about this, right?
Yes,
What is
yes.
actually happening inside a battery? Like, what makes a battery a battery?
So batteries are magical, and I didn't really realize this until I was like 22 and actually doing research on these kinds of electrochemical systems. Batteries are amazing because they both store and convert energy. And that's actually really unique because you think of like a gas-powered car, you have the tank of gas, the storage of the energy, and you have the engine that converts the energy. Those are two separate systems. In a battery, it's all in one. And so what's going on inside of a battery are these chemical and electrical reactions or electrochemical reactions that convert the energy. So you have chemical energy converting to electrical energy during when you're powering a device, electrical energy converting to chemical energy when you're charging up your device. And that's a whole magical world in and of itself. And there's a lot of different types of batteries with different materials inside of the batteries doing these electrochemical reactions or redox reactions. And that's the magic. That's the magic right there of how a battery works.
Yeah, I really like the idea of calling them magical because I agree. It's kind of cool that you have this one kind of innocuous looking item that is doing all of this amazing work. So we see batteries a lot in our everyday lives, right? Like we've come to seeing lithium ion batteries in our cell phones. I have my cell phone with my notes right here, in the laptop that I'm talking to you on, in our EVs. So, why is lithium ion such a dominant chemistry in the battery world where it's just kind of in our everyday lives, even if we don't really think about it?
The short answer for why batteries, lithium-ion batteries, are so dominant right now is 2 reasons. It's cost effective, they're low cost,
Um,
and the second is that they work really well at what they do. So, what we've seen is before lithium-ion batteries, we had other battery types, lead-acid batteries, nickel metal hydride, right? And those were the ones in our society, but we didn't have electric vehicles back then, and that's because we didn't have the right kinds of batteries that can provide the power for those vehicles that makes commercial sense. And since the 1980s and into the early 1990s, we've seen the commercialization of the lithium ion battery. And so over time, the cost has lowered, the supply chain has been built, and our know how and the development of this technology and improving its performance has all cut up to the point where it's fantastic in all of our devices, our laptops, our cell phones, our cars, like, we're seeing these new technologies that we could only dream of, like, have you seen those advertisements for, like, humanoid robots that could do chores in
yes.
homes?
Yes, those are wild. Because we have some humanoid robots at UGA that they're doing some research for manufacturing on, but they're not the same as the fancy ones that are folding laundry. Those are kind of wild to me.
I don't know if those really work, but
Yeah, they do it very slowly, which if the pile was gonna sit there all week anyway, it's maybe fine, but
Oh.
anyway, so on the same note of new technology in our everyday lives, right? For the everyday users, I know for me, I know that like I've had to replace a phone battery because it suddenly got slow and it wasn't charging as to the full capacity that it used to. And the same thing also happens in EVs, etc. People have a lot of concerns about like charging speed, range, lifespan. What's actually happening in terms of a battery's health when we hear of these batteries aging or degrading? Like, can you explain more about what's actually going on there?
Of course, and you're exactly right. As you use a device over time, you have, like, less energy you can get out of that, and that's called the battery's capacity that's decreasing over time. And that happens across all batteries over time, like, this isn't a unique things, and it's really complex what's actually contributing to that. A good thing to think about is, you know, the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears where Goldilocks is eating the porridge and it's like, "Oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, like, gotta have it just right." Batteries are like Goldilocks to the diva extreme level. Um, you gotta have it at the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold. You gotta have it charging at the right rate using the correct charger for that battery or that device. And you have to have it like some batteries are even temperamental. If you keep it charged to 100% for a long time,
Wow.
it'll decrease. Like my old laptop that I had, I just left it like plugged in, and later on I took it to class and it would just drain so quickly. So it's like that's the thing though is over time, no matter what you do with your battery, it's going to lose capacity. It's just these little like tricks of treating it well that will help extend its life or make sure that it's working. But the good news is that all batteries are built in with a what's called a battery management system that actually helps your battery survive. So if you've seen on your phone, like I'll try to charge it and it's too hot and it'll tell me, "Oh, I can't charge because I'm too hot right now." Right?
Yeah.
So it has these built-in mechanisms to really take care of it. So while I say, you know, it's a complicated story because the materials in the cell are very sensitive to high temperature, low temperature, to different charge rates. At the end of the day, you can use your technology as it's built. That's the job of the manufacturer to make sure that it's safe to use when you're using it correctly. And so because of that battery management system and another analogy I like is, you know, in that scene in Toy Story where Buzz Lightyear is like flying and Woody's like, "You're just falling with style." I like to say that batteries are like, they're working, but they're also breaking with style, and it's all about how we use them.
I love that. The other thing I thought of as you were talking about this is I do know someone with a F-150 Lightning, and he was explaining to me that his battery management system like pinged one day and said, "You need to get your battery checked out. Like
Yeah,
this cell in the pouch looks a bit funky." So even with the cars for the most part will warn you that the battery needs to get checked. So there's
yeah,
also that.
yeah, and cars all have, like, the cooling systems for the batteries too, like, mine will turn on a hot day when it's sitting out in my driveway, so we're trying to design them to be safe and to take care of the battery itself.
Yeah, exactly. So the next kind of topic group for the questions is you mentioned this earlier, the emerging chemistries. So the most popular
Yes.
one that we hear the most is like solid state batteries, which solid state batteries just feel like the boogeyman because I feel like we've been talking about the solid state batteries for years. And the first time I saw one was a couple of weeks ago when I met someone on UGA's campus and interviewed them who studies solid state batteries, and she's been studying them for 7 years. I was like, that is amazing because everybody else is just like this boogeyman that doesn't exist yet and is always 5 to 10 years away. So I guess the question on the solid state battery side first, foremost, because we need to start with the basics, is what makes a solid state battery different from the other battery chemistries that we're used to? Like, what does it actually mean?
At the end of the day, solid state just means that there's no liquid inside of the battery. So typically in our batteries, we have a what's called a liquid electrolyte in them,
Mhm.
and this helps facilitate the transport of those ions, like lithium ions, through the battery. Now, I hear this a lot of like, what's the difference between a solid state battery and a lithium ion battery? Well, it turns out lithium ion batteries can have a liquid electrolyte or a solid electrolyte. So lithium ion batteries can indeed be solid state batteries. The same goes for sodium ion batteries, which you may hear about. Those could be liquid based or solid state batteries. And now there's new kinds of nomenclature wording coming out for semi solid state batteries or hybrid batteries that have both liquid and solid inside of them. So it's pretty complex when you get down into it. But in general, solid state just means all the materials inside of the battery are solid.
That's honestly the best explanation I've ever heard for it. Honestly, I
It's so
ask this question
confusing.
a
I
lot.
hope I can help.
It's so confusing. And it's also news to me that you have lithium ion batteries that could be solid state. Like I thought solid state was like a complete departure from the lithium. But it makes sense to me that there's like some sort of spectrum that you can do a solid state battery that has lithium components in like the positive and negative side, like the anode and cathode, and it's just a different electrolyte going on in the middle.
Exactly, exactly, and that's the thing is when you introduce solid state batteries, because you're using different materials, it's a different manufacturing process. You're maybe using like the holy grail of solid state batteries is to use a lithium metal anode. Normally, batteries don't have this, some liquid do, but typically they don't. But this lithium metal anode lithium, if it's exposed to water or air, moisture in the air, it can catch fire. So if
Yes.
you're manufacturing lithium metal, you have to do it in a very low humidity environment. And that like, already batteries are often made in a low humidity environment or a dry room, but it
Yep.
just changes the manufacturing process and often makes it more expensive and maybe even more finicky to control. And that's really a big challenge when it comes to, like, commercializing it, to making it succeed, and then also the performance of it, like, our liquid-based electrolyte batteries do a really good job. Like,
They
they're
work
really good
great.
at what they do. And
We've
so
had them for a long time.
yes, and their cost is nice and low at this point, so it's really hard for solid state to come in and, like, take over the EV market, right? And we actually already use solid state batteries in very niche applications, like medical devices where you don't need a lot of electricity to power your device.
I didn't know that. That's good to
Yeah.
know. I guess you kind of answered one of my later questions, which was kind of the barriers to bringing it to market.
Yeah.
But one of the related questions to that is what is just hype in the solid state battery world and what is more promising, at least in your opinion? Because I know that this is contentious potentially, but
And I don't
I
wanna
would
give
love.
anyone, like, investor advice and then it's wrong, I'm not an expert in finances, don't trust my, thoughts, but in general, the way that battery companies need to get funding, they have to really hype up what the impact they're gonna have to have the investors say, "Here, take my money." So
Yes.
that's why we're seeing a lot of headlines about solid state batteries, and then companies are, like, being competitive about it. But at the end of the day, unless we see these improvements in manufacturing and in performance, it's not going to be as mainstream as maybe the headlines paint the picture to be. And so I think what we could see though is in certain niche applications, introduction of solid state batteries for those.
Mm. That makes sense. Um, I guess the follow-up question to that piece is outside of the medical devices, right? What are some of the other key applications where you think solid state batteries in terms of niche will make sense?
That's a good question. Anything with like a low electricity need, a smaller battery size. So even perhaps consumer electronics may be one, or um, different applications that are more compact. So less like the electric vehicles, perhaps electric aircraft. And what could be interesting is when you have there's certain advantages of a solid state battery versus a liquid electrolyte based battery. And so even systems, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but combinations of the two where you can actually use both in an application, that could be pretty interesting to play with to get certain perks. But um yeah, I it's I think they're still trying to find that market fit, and we are seeing partnerships between solid state batteries and different like automotive companies to test prototypes, maybe even for higher end sports cars who want a lot of high energy density, a lot of power to be fancy and drive fast. So,
Yes.
but it's
Yeah,
more
no.
expensive.
It is, because like BYD made an announcement about their Blade solid state battery. Like Nissan says that they're trying to commercialize it by 2029. This is why I asked about all of the
Yeah.
hype, because I personally am following this industry and just see everybody talking about their solid state batteries. And I was like, this has been a personal question I've wanted to ask Jill, if we're being really honest. It's like, this is one question. I was like, I want Jill's take. So let's move on to some other chemistries because we could talk about solid state all day, but we don't need to stay there, right? I've seen some other battery chemistries like the sodium ion that you mentioned earlier, the LFP, which is for the people on the pod, lithium iron phosphate, right? And more. How do you think they compare to lithium ion, or is it fair to compare them to lithium ion when you're talking about them?
Yeah, and like I said, when we're talking about lithium-ion batteries, lithium is the charge transfer ion within the battery. So for lithium iron phosphate batteries, that's still a type of lithium ion battery, just with an lithium iron phosphate cathode. Other types of
Mhm.
cathodes are like nickel-based cathodes. Sodium ion is a different chemistry, and with these different other chemistries like sodium ion and lithium iron phosphate, these have advantages because these are using more abundant materials than lithium or the nickel-based cathode that I mentioned, which actually includes cobalt and manganese too. And so when we're shifting to like an LFP chemistry, those are the cheapest lithium-ion batteries on the market right now, and so those are
Ah.
actually being put into a lot of electric vehicles, into stationary energy storage, into applications that don't need a super high energy density at and it's always a trade-off with cost or with, how many times can you charge and discharge the battery or cycle it. So each chemistry brings its own trade-offs, really, and they're all trying to find their place in the market right now, and with the technology development, with supply chain development, this is an evolving and complex space that a lot of companies are trying to navigate. So,
sense. That
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense. I had heard about the lithium iron phosphate batteries being starting to be used in the EVs, but I hadn't realized that like part of the main reason why was the cost, and that makes a lot of sense because right now there's all this pressure to get costs down on the EVs, largely because the battery is the most expensive part, and the competition in the ecosystem is kind of heating up. So they need to be trying to compete on everything that they can compete on, not just features, but definitely price as well. Um, I guess for in terms of other trade-offs, what are some of the other trade-offs besides cost? Because I know that some of them can be like EV fire safety, but I'm sure there's some other trade-offs that people are considering as well when they're choosing between these different battery chemistries.
Yes. So there's so many different performance metrics for batteries. I mean, just when we're using our phone, right? We want our battery to last the full day of charge. So that's related to its energy density. And we want our phone to be lightweight enough for us to carry. So we don't want the battery to be big and bulky and heavy. That's
Right.
volumetric energy density, gravimetric energy density, and then we want it to last for, like, a few years at least, right? You're saying over time your capacity decreases, so we want our battery to cycle, charge or discharge multiple times, thousands of times. If you're picturing you're charging your battery every night, so every day is like one cycle for your phone battery, and then if you have it for 3 years, that's close to, over 1,000 cycles that you want it to last at least. Another characteristic is how much power can it output at once, its discharge rate or its power density. So, uh, there's the temperature range that it can operate.
Oh,
What is the voltage of the battery based on what materials are inside of it. And all of these have implications to that end user. And depending on the end user, they're gonna be able, "Oh, I can pay this much for it." Like for our phones, we can pay a certain amount for the battery. And so it's like you don't want a battery that's too expensive for people to be able to buy. Or for uh, stationary storage systems, which are powering our grid, we want those to be cheap as possible. But they can be bulky and heavy because they're just sitting on the land, they're not having to be moved. So you can see that every application has its own story, its own pros and cons, and finding the best technology for each application is a joint effort between a lot of people who are working on getting this technology out there.
no, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So everything from energy density to how long the battery lasts to even just what temperatures and how well it deals with temperature. Fascinating. I'm learning so much today, Jill. Although, to be fair, I knew I was going to. I always learn a ton of things whenever I talk to you and come to you with all my random questions. The last question in this section and on this topic of the chemistries is if you personally, Jill, and again, not investment advice for the people, had to bet on one chemistry that would define the next decade, what would it be and why?
This is a big question, and I've been thinking about it since you asked me this of what to even say. Because I feel like a lot of people focus on the chemistry as the area of innovation within batteries. But I actually would push back and say there's so many other parts of the battery value chain, as we call it, that I think will underscore how the next decade will be. So that's to say first and foremost. But as far as chemistries, I think we're just gonna see lithium ion really just transform our world, and we're seeing sodium ion coming onto the market, and as long as we're able to establish that supply chain and find a way to potentially compete with lithium, which is a whole can of worms that I wish I knew more about, like, that could be something interesting, but lithium ion has such a chokehold on everyone that it's
It
like,
does. It really
that's
does.
really the chemistry that's it's gonna be there as far as I can see into the future.
I could see that. I am not going to get into the critical minerals of the world because we plan to have another pod just to talk about critical
Oh,
minerals.
cool,
We do,
cool.
we don't have time for that today.
Yeah.
To your point, you're like, there's a lot of reasons why lithium is contentious. And I'm like, yes, the critical minerals,
Yes.
like geopolitics of it all. One thing that you did say though, which is something I've been talking to a lot of people about lately, is on the life span and the full life of the battery. And I think there's a lot of innovation that's going to happen specifically because of rare earths and critical minerals on the redesign of batteries to make them easier to recycle. Because right
Yes.
now it is such a messy, intensive, and inefficient process. Like you can still do it. And the only reason we're doing it is because the critical minerals are so expensive and valuable. But we are doing it in not the best way right now, mostly because the batteries are hard to take apart.
Yeah, and the US in general has a recycling problem in general. Like, all of our materials are not all of them, there is recycling, like the lead acid batteries, there's a high rate of recycling there, like 99% of lead acid batteries are recycled. But so much of our stuff ends up in landfills. Batteries are
Mhm.
way too valuable, though, to end up in landfills, and there's just
Oh,
a small, small percentage, very tiny percentage that gets kinda lost in limbo as far as the automakers aren't, like, collecting, repurposing, reusing them, and there's currently legislation and policy that's taking shape to handle those batteries, so I think a lot of people are worried about, like, "Will my battery go in a landfill?" Most likely not for your electric vehicles, but you you know those singing cards that you could get for your, like, your birthday that, like, sing you happy birthday? Those have
yes.
those have a lithium-ion battery in them, and what do we
Really?
all do with those? We just throw them in the trash, and
That's wild.
those are that has critical minerals inside of them, so,
Yes.
really, our landfills are our mines of the future. Like, that exists. And I'm hearing from, like, one of the companies I work with, Blue Whale Materials, that does battery recycling. They're seeing battery recycling as part of an urban mining collection, which includes, like, for landfills, people use the term urban mining. So, anyway, you can see I could talk about this for days, like, it's so interesting, and there's
Yes.
so much that can be done and so much opportunity in this space that you would be surprised how much needs to happen but isn't happening yet, and we need the people to to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It is literally a we in the US do not have the full capacity for all of the battery recycling and battery manufacturing that we're going to need in the future. And yes, we could talk about this all day, and I'm about to move on. But you've been talking to Blue Whale. I spend a lot of my time talking with one of our founding partners, Cox Automotive, who's actually one of the like really big battery refurbishers and recyclers as well on this, which is why this has to be a whole other topic that we talk about because that's a whole hour by itself, right? Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Jill, where we walk through large scale production, how batteries reshape the broader energy ecosystem, and Jill's journey in the industry.